Hi, this is Sarah McLeod, your host for Proven Cures, and I want to thank you for tuning in to part 2 of this video series about eliminating insulin from your regimen as a type 2 diabetic. As I said in part 1, the usual advice from doctors in order to reverse your insulin is to follow certain dietary restrictions and get an adequate amount of exercise. And unfortunately, a lot of people with chronic diabetes, meaning they've had it for 10 years and more, have found these dietary restrictions and getting in extra exercise to fail for them. Maybe they weren't able to follow these lifestyle changes consistently enough in order to reverse their insulin resistance and their diabetes, and instead the reverse happened. They become more insulin resistant over the years and actually end up having to shoot up with insulin in order to stay alive. The remarkable thing, however, with the advent of new weight loss surgeries, in particular bariatric surgery. Now we have so many different kinds of bariatric surgeries. But what one consistent result of bariatric surgery in people with diabetes, particularly type 2 diabetes, that has been discovered is that the bariatric surgery, due to the strict food and caloric restriction that it causes, actually reverses diabetes in most patients. However, it may not last, because over time people are able to eat more food, and as they eat more food, then diabetes can, of course, reoccur. However, the promising results found by severe food restriction actually prompted 4 researchers, and I'll give you their names. Their names are Suleiman Furmli, Rami Elmasry, Ramos, and Jason Fung, all with the Intensive Dietary Management Clinic in Toronto, Canada. Having seen the results of bariatric surgery in people with type 2 diabetics, they actually decided to perform a case series study on 3 male insulin-dependent type 2 diabetics to see if voluntary dietary restriction, also referred to in the dieting world as intermittent fasting, would yield the same results as bariatric surgery. Now, the specific title of their study is Therapeutic Use of Intermittent Fasting for People with Type 2 Diabetes as an Alternative to Insulin. Let me see if I can tell you exactly where that is published. Give me 1 second, please. BMJ Case Reports. BMJ Case Reports is where that study can be found. Let's see if I can see what the BMJ actually stands for. BMJ Case Reports, Bariatric Medical Journal, I believe is what the BMJ stands for. So that is where you can find the study that I am about to discuss with you. Now, the 3 participants at baseline, or at their initial consultations when they went into the clinic in Toronto, were actually taking each at least 70 units of insulin per day. And all could be described as chronic diabetics, with each person having been diabetic anywhere from 10 to 25 years. The youngest man was 40 years old, and the oldest was 67 years old. And like I said also in part 1 of this video series, is that if you are taking oral medication for diabetes management, you can still continue to take oral medication. It is still expected of you throughout the fasting period. And the oral diabetic medications that these particular participants were taking were metformin and another one that starts with a C and called canagliflozin. I've never actually heard of that one before. It is important for me to share with you the profiles of these study participants, because if you are a chronic diabetic, if you are someone who's had diabetes for a really long time, you're on insulin, I also mentioned this in part 1, that you may feel hopeless. You may feel like, gee, there's really no help for me. This is nice that you're sharing this information, but I seriously doubt that it can be applicable to me and my situation. Well, let me also share the comorbidities that these participants came into the clinic with. Okay? And this should drive home the fact that help may very well exist for you too. Okay? These participants also came in with having hypertension, hypercholesterolemia, chronic kidney disease, renal cell carcinoma, that's cancer, kidney cancer, with one person having had his entire kidney removed. Those were the 3 comorbidities. So those are pretty serious. And as we all know, especially the chronic kidney disease can come on after so many years. And this person actually did have type 2 diabetes for the longest period of time. He had it for 25 years. And as we know in the medical field, CKD, is definitely exacerbated by having diabetes for so long and having been on these medications for so long. So that's the profile of the subjects. And that should give you an idea of the kinds of people that were being evaluated for long-term change. So I think that's really promising. Now, as far as the regimens they followed, because I know that's what you're dying to hear about, one subject chose, they actually could make choices. One subject chose to fast every other day and was followed for 11 months. And the other 2 chose to fast 3 days out of every week and were followed for 7 and 11 months respectively. Okay, now on fasting days, subjects only had dinner. So it's not like they didn't eat at all during the day. They just had dinner. And at other times during the day, they were allowed to drink as much low-calorie fluids as they liked: water, coffee, tea, and meat bone broth. They were also encouraged to take a multivitamin to make up for nutrient deficits. Now, on regular eating days, subjects had lunch and dinner, not breakfast, and were encouraged to maintain the standard diabetic diet of foods low in sugar and refined carbs. So that gives you a general scope of the profile of the subjects involved, and the regimens that they were expected to follow. Now, this is the part of the series where I tell you, take this to a doctor. Don't do this on your own. Make sure you watch part 3 of this video series before you jump into this, because as you may already know, being insulin dependent means you are at a very precarious place and you can get sick. You need to be monitored very, very closely and be carefully weaned off of insulin before diving into this dietary restrictive study. Okay, so please, if this sounds good to you so far, it sounds applicable to your situation, although this was only studied in men, I'll encourage you to watch part 3, which is coming up next, and to please do this caloric restriction under the supervision of a physician who's willing to work with you to wean you off of the insulin based on this study. Don't do it by yourself. You have to be careful. I don't want you to get sick. and then say, Sarah told me. No. Sarah told you to go to the doctor, okay? Take the study results to the doctor. And tune in to part 3. Thank you.